Hello everyone. Enjoy these thrilling moments of relaxation as you watch the story unfold. A 9-year-old girl is pregnant, and just before giving birth, doctors discover something terrifying. Luna, a petite girl, only about 15 meters tall with a slender figure and youthful face, makes her look no older than 9 years old. Now caught in an emergency situation, she wears a simple white dress, her large round eyes filled with fear and pain. Her belly, round and prominent, stands out against her tiny frame. Beside her is Paul, a 37-year-old man, his face tense and anxious. He runs frantically into the hospital, carrying her in his arms, desperately crying out, "Doctor, please save her." Paul's shout echoes through the hospital hallways, drawing immediate attention. Nurses freeze at the sight of them while patients and their companions whisper in concern. What happened? As a nurse approaches and sees Luna's condition, she tries to remain professional but can't contain the growing anger within her. How could a 10-year-old girl, still so young, end up in this situation? Paul, his voice breaking with despair, pleads, "Please, we need help. We can't waste a single second." The nurse urgently calls through the intercom. "We need a stretcher at the main entrance immediately." Meanwhile, another nurse gently comforts Luna, trying to reassure her. "Stay strong, sweetheart. We're going to help you." The voices blend into a tense atmosphere, a mix of worry, outrage, and curiosity about the tragedy unfolding before them. Meanwhile, the hallway becomes a chaotic painting of emotions. Some express rage over the heartbreaking sight of a child who doesn't even look older than 10, carrying a pregnancy. Others are left speechless, unable to comprehend how such a horrifying event could occur. Even the nurses, though striving to remain calm, can't hide their shock. How could a little girl end up in this situation? A small but furious voice rises, emphasizing that this is not just a medical emergency, but a horrifying reflection of society itself. But the chaos does not stop there. Paul, still carrying Luna, embodies sheer desperation. His hands tremble, his voice cracks as he shouts once more, "Doctor, please save her. We need help. Can't waste another second." His plea rings like an alarm, shaking everyone into recognizing the severity of this crisis. At the same time, nurses quickly coordinate and report through the hospital's intercom system. Urgent messages repeat rapidly, summoning emergency medical support. "We need a stretcher at the main entrance now." The nurse's voice is heavy with tension, forcing immediate action. The whispers among bystanders grow more intense. Patients and visitors begin to murmur, some even passing harsh judgments about the girl's condition. "A child who doesn't even look 10 and she's pregnant." The statement reverberates through the halls, a mixture of horror and judgment, as if to remind everyone that something unthinkable is happening before their eyes. The hospital corridor is now heavier than ever. Shocked voices, judgmental stares, and growing panic spread everywhere, forming a multi-layered tapestry of concern, anger, and even denial, as people struggle to understand the terrifying reality before them. At that moment, time seems to freeze, and the collision of emotions creates an atmosphere thick with tension and fear. As Luna is rushed into the emergency room, the atmosphere shifts dramatically from the chaos outside. Doctors and nurses immediately focus on stabilizing Luna's condition. The dim glow of fluorescent lights, combined with the sharp commands of doctors, creates an environment that is both solemn and intensely nerve-wracking. Nurses with expert hands and professional precision begin checking her vitals, monitoring blood pressure, oxygen levels, and other critical signs to determine how dire her condition truly is. Dr. Guadalupe stood before the operating table, her hands quickly checking each medical tool, preparing for the emergency surgery. Every movement she made was filled with caution, every action full of responsibility. She knew time was slipping away, and on this operating table, the life of a little girl, only 9 years old, hung in the balance between life and death. Her eyes never left the medical instruments, from the sharp scalpel to the machines monitoring vital signs. Everything needed to be checked thoroughly, with no room for error. Luna was brought into the operating room, her face pale, her eyes tightly shut in pain. Though her tiny body seemed fragile like a falling petal, it now had to face a life and death struggle. Every step of the doctors and nurses was accompanied by a racing heartbeat, a tense breath. Every movement had to be precise, no room for distraction or haste. The little girl could only breathe weakly, her face showing confusion and fear, but unable to utter a single plea. At this moment, everything around Luna became blurry. Each movement of the doctor, each click of the medical tools, seemed like waves crashing into her tender mind. The nurses and Dr. Guadalupe worked quietly, focused on their tasks, but in their eyes, there was deep respect for the tiny life they were holding in their hands. Do not let a single moment pass in vain. That was the only thought in their minds. Everyone in the room could feel the weight of this surgery, as if they were all shouldering Luna's fate. The life monitoring equipment beeped with steady signals, but the fragility of the little girl still made the air feel heavy. Every time her heart beat, every breath she took was a reminder of the fragility of life. Dr. Guadalupe glanced at the screen. Luna's heart rate was stabilizing, but the tension still remained. She had to focus completely. Each incision, each step, had to be precisely executed. She knew that no mistake could happen, for even the smallest error could take away the life of a being. The entire team of doctors and nurses worked like a well-oiled machine. No unnecessary words, no wasted gestures. Each person knew their role. A nurse hurriedly administered anesthesia. Another moved surgical instruments closer to the operating table. Every step was carefully calculated, as no one wanted Luna to endure any more pain. The fluorescent lights shone brightly, but it wasn't enough to brighten the suffocating space. Each passing moment felt like a life and death challenge, and the medical team was doing their best to help Luna survive. Each cut of Dr. Guadalupe's scalpel made the tension in the room even greater. All eyes were fixed on the incision, watching every movement of the doctor's hands. The eyes of everyone in the operating room, whether doctors, nurses, or those watching from outside, were all focused on one goal: saving Luna. They couldn't let the life of such a small being be lost just because of a moment's carelessness. Time passed, and each second seemed to go by faster, but the worry and tension in the operating room never decreased. The medical team understood that this wasn't just a routine surgery. This was a battle between life and death, between hope and despair. Luna, lying there unconscious, didn't know that each movement of the doctors was part of their great effort to save her life. Her survival depended on the decisions Dr. Guadalupe and the nurses made in every next moment. Meanwhile, outside the operating room, those waiting in the hallway couldn't hide their anxiety. Their eyes were directed toward the operating room, waiting for a miracle. No one spoke, but they were all waiting for a sign, an update on Luna's condition. Every time a doctor or nurse stepped out, a wave of hope rose. But by now, everyone could only silently pray and hope that her life would be spared. The operating room was silent in a collective breath. Dr. Guadalupe couldn't let the exhaustion show. Each action needed to be carried out with perfect accuracy. The tension continued until a clear signal from the equipment indicated that everything was stabilizing, that the little girl still had a chance to survive. Luna did not yet know she had gone through a life and death trial. But in this operating room, the tension hadn't lifted, for the battle between life and death was still ongoing. In the operating room, the tension remained high, each moment feeling like a life or death battle. Dr. Guadalupe stayed focused on her task, her surgical movements precise, with no room for even the slightest error. However, when she examined Luna's body, something abnormal suddenly appeared. She paused, her sharp eyes scanning Luna's small body as if searching for answers. Each organ she examined showed unusual development, differing greatly from what should be expected of a 9-year-old child. Although Luna appeared weak and fragile on the outside, her internal organs had developed like that of an adult. This left Dr. Guadalupe stunned, a sense of unease rising within her. She slowly moved her hands over Luna's body, checking carefully, then repeating the procedure again. Each time her hands made contact, Dr. Guadalupe's heart raced faster. This could not simply be the normal development of a child. There was something far too complex, too different. Dr. Guadalupe glanced at the medical chart, and the data didn't align with what was expected for a child Luna's age. Strange signs continued to appear before her, and each step of the surgery grew even more tense. Dr. Guadalupe immediately instructed the surgical team and nurses to stop all operations. She needed to investigate this issue thoroughly before continuing. She quickly ordered a series of tests, checking Luna's physiological and hormone levels. No one in the operating room dared to move, all waiting for the answer they knew would change everything. Dr. Guadalupe couldn't wait any longer. She looked at Luna, whose eyes were shut tight, but everything around her felt suspended in confusion and worry. After receiving the test results, the medical team could hardly believe what they were reading. Luna's condition wasn't just an anomaly, it was a rare medical condition. Dr. Guadalupe, who had many years of experience, was also shocked to discover that Luna was suffering from a condition called pituitary dwarfism. This rare disease caused abnormal development, particularly in the growth of her internal organs. Although Luna's outward appearance remained that of a small child, her body was developing like that of an adult. This somewhat explained the mystery of her condition. Dr. Guadalupe couldn't hide her astonishment in her eyes. She sighed, feeling both relieved and heavy-hearted. Now they understood the underlying cause of the condition. But it did not ease the worry over Luna's situation. Each passing day, her body faced greater risks, and sudden treatment could not help but cause harm. Dr. Guadalupe quickly consulted with the team of specialists, requesting them to conduct further research into Luna's disease. She knew that without timely and accurate treatment, Luna's condition could worsen in ways no one could imagine. The doctors began gathering information about Luna's condition from medical literature, consulting with leading experts in the field of medicine. They needed to understand every aspect of this disease, from its causes to effective treatment methods. Dr. Guadalupe realized more and more that the little girl was bearing a disease that was not only dangerous, but also very complicated. Meanwhile, Luna's physiological signs continued without pause, showing no sign of slowing down. The entire medical team felt the weight of the situation heavier than ever before. Why would a 9-year-old girl have to carry such a disease? That was a question no one could immediately answer. The room was silent, the stillness overwhelming the space, with only the sound of each person's breath. Although the cause had been determined, what would happen next remained unpredictable. Could Luna overcome this challenge? The medical team had to continue fighting against time and the complexities of the girl's body to give her a chance at survival. Dr. Guadalupe stood silently in the operating room, her mind filled with questions and concerns. However, now she knew that saving Luna was not just about saving a child's life. It was also about solving a medical mystery that no one could easily explain. But no matter how difficult it became, they had to keep fighting. For Luna's life, for her future, and for the child growing inside. Paul sat quietly in the hospital hallway, his hand gripping the chair tightly, an overwhelming sense of anxiety rising within him. Although there was no information about Luna's condition, he could feel the pain and despair growing inside him. Each minute felt like a century, and he couldn't stop thinking about the little girl's situation. His eyes could not leave the operating room door, where the doctors and nurses were working hard to save the little girl he had come to consider as his own daughter. He prayed silently, hoping for a miracle, hoping they would save Luna. Around him, the air felt heavy. The others, the patients and relatives waiting, could also sense the tension emanating from the hallway. Every step felt like a blow to Paul's heart, as he saw the anxiety reflected in the eyes of those around him. Whispers began to rise. Unclear stories, hasty judgments, all started to create a stifling atmosphere. Paul tried not to listen, but those words echoed in his mind like an alarm bell that would not stop. "That girl is only 9 years old. How could she be pregnant?" a woman whispered, her eyes fixed on the operating room door with a mix of curiosity and surprise. "There must be something wrong. This can't be normal," another voice chimed in, filled with suspicion. Paul heard every word, every sentence, but he couldn't do anything. Those judgments were like a stone weighing down his chest, causing his heart to ache. They didn't know anything about Luna, about her life, about the struggles she had to endure. The gossip only increased his unease, making the atmosphere even heavier. People couldn't see Luna as a suffering child in the operating room. They only saw a strange story, an unbelievable tale. A man standing nearby spoke with disdain. "This generation is so strange. She's only 9 and already pregnant. Where is this world going?" Those words made Paul even angrier, but he dared not react. He knew he couldn't cause more trouble right now, couldn't make things more complicated. He only wanted one thing, to see Luna safe, for her to survive, and for him to always be by her side, no matter how the world judged them. Although the doctors and nurses in the operating room were working intensely, they couldn't help but hear the gossip and skepticism surrounding them. But they couldn't let those things affect their work. The hospital was a place of healing, and they had to do everything they could to help Luna survive this dangerous situation. However, the tension in the operating room, as well as the anxiety from the hallway, made the atmosphere even heavier. A nurse walked out of the operating room, his face serious. He said nothing, just passed through the hallway, his contemplative gaze revealing his involvement. Paul looked at him, his eyes pleading for some reassurance, but the nurse just shook his head lightly. His eyes said everything. The situation was still unclear. These words only made Paul more afraid. For every time someone came out of the operating room, he hoped for a positive sign. But it was always quiet, filled with uncertainty. Everyone in the hospital seemed to be coming up with hypotheses, passing judgments on Luna's situation. But none of them knew the truth behind this story. No one knew that Luna was not an innocent child in a strange situation, but a little girl who had suffered pain and trauma that none of them could ever imagine. Only Paul, who had always been by Luna's side, understood her suffering. He knew that Luna was not facing this challenge alone. He was with her, sharing each painful moment. As the minutes passed, Paul felt the weight of the situation grow. The people around him continued gossiping, but he couldn't blame them. They didn't understand. They couldn't understand the feeling of a father standing between hope and despair, fearing he would lose the child he loved most. He looked at the operating room door, silently praying that Dr. Guadalupe and the nurses would do everything they could to save Luna. Another patient walked by, their curious gaze and whispering, making Paul feel even more suffocated. But he couldn't do anything but wait. The anxiety surged within him, making him want to rush into the operating room just to see Luna, even if only for a moment, to know where she was, what her condition was. But he knew he could only wait until the doctor announced the situation. In those moments, everything around him seemed to blur, leaving only the whispers, the hurried footsteps, and the invisible judgments raining down on him, making the atmosphere even heavier. The unanswered questions about Luna's situation kept swirling in his mind, but he knew that only one thing mattered the most: to hold on to hope, no matter what happened. In the operating room, the atmosphere was heavy and suffocating with tension. The team of doctors, their faces full of determination, worked with absolute focus. Dr. Guadalupe stood at the center, her eyes alert, each movement precise and decisive. Despite many years of experience, this time, she felt a particular weight. What was happening on the operating table was not just a rush to the emergency room, but a life and death battle, a race against time. Every second, Every minute that passed could determine the fate of Luna, the tiny girl lying on the operating table with her frail body and tender heart. The doctors and nurses in the room poured all their energy into this surgery. The medical instruments were meticulously prepared, each item placed in its proper position, ready for the next step. No one spoke a word. Only the sound of heavy breathing and the surgical knife cutting into Luna's body echoed in the room, like the heartbeat, strong yet resilient. Dr. Guadalupe controlled each movement with mastery, leaving no moment unaccounted for. She knew that every action had to be perfect, and any mistake, no matter how small, could cost Luna her chance at survival. Luna lay there, her eyes tightly shut, unaware that every move Dr. Guadalupe made was a fight with death itself to save her. The girl could feel nothing except the overwhelming pain from her fragile body. But everyone in the operating room, though cold and focused, knew that her life depended on their accuracy and speed. Every breath, every pulse was feeding into this battle. No one in the room could afford to be careless. No one could afford to tire. They were facing an extraordinarily complex medical challenge, and everyone knew that Luna only had one chance. Dr. Guadalupe carefully pinpointed the areas that needed surgery, a task requiring absolute precision. She could not let the tension cloud her mind. She could not let personal emotions interfere with her decisions. Luna's life depended on her and the medical team's ability to perform their duties. Dr. Guadalupe furrowed her brow, then sighed, feeling a sense of worry she couldn't conceal. But she was too familiar with moments like this. Every surgery, especially urgent ones like this, was a challenge for any doctor. But this was Luna, a girl whose life had become a part of Dr. Guadalupe's own heart. She knew she could not fail. She could not give up. As the scalpel gently sliced through Luna's skin, all eyes in the room were fixed on it, not daring to look away even for a second. Every movement of Dr. Guadalupe was a challenge, like walking on a fragile bridge. She had to act quickly, but still maintain absolute precision. Dr. Guadalupe knew that time was the deciding factor in this surgery. If they did not resolve Luna's condition quickly, everything might be too late. Luna had no awareness of what was happening around her. She lay there, completely unable to control her body, unable to feel the salvation or the relentless efforts of the medical team. The only thing she felt was that life was gradually slipping away from her body, a vague yet palpable sensation, as if she were floating between two worlds, one of life, the other of death. But Dr. Guadalupe and her team continued, like warriors who would never surrender. Each passing minute was a monumental challenge. The hours in the operating room seemed endless. The incisions on Luna's body were becoming the marks of this battle, a battle that could only be overcome by the resilience of the medical team. With every step of the surgery, Dr. Guadalupe kept reminding herself of one thing: to save Luna. She could not let worry, fatigue, or any other factor affect her work. Time seemed to stand still when Dr. Guadalupe completed the crucial step of the surgery. But everyone understood that this was only the first step in a long and challenging journey. Luna still had many dangers to face. The operating room was silent, but no one dared to relax, not even for a moment. They were all fighting an invisible battle, but one that was very real. And throughout this process, every second was a fight between life and death. A fight where only absolute precision and the unity of all could bring hope to Luna. Finally, after moments filled with tension and exhaustion, Dr. Guadalupe stood up straight and took a deep breath. Although the outcome was still uncertain, she felt that they had made significant progress in this journey. But the battle was far from over. After the intense surgery, Luna gradually regained consciousness in the hazy space of the hospital room. The soft hum of the machines, coupled with the harsh fluorescent lights, created an unreal feeling, as if she were dreaming. The dull pain from the incision made Luna's small body feel heavy, but it couldn't erase the sense of calm and peace that came with a warm hand holding hers. Paul, the father she hadn't been aware of since entering the operating room, was still sitting beside her, holding her hand tightly throughout the anxious time. He hadn't left, hadn't strayed, even though he knew the fatigue would eventually come. Luna, in her dazed and painful state, could feel Paul's presence. His warm voice, his gentle whispers of reassurance, echoed in her ears like a soft wave pulling her from the nightmare. He told her everything would be okay, that she wouldn't have to face these hardships alone, and that he would always be by her side, no matter how the world changed. Paul had promised never to abandon her, no matter how great the challenges ahead. Luna, though her eyes hadn't fully opened, could feel Paul's promises like a bright light in the dark night. She could feel the warmth of his love for her, a love that didn't need flowery words, only actions, presence, and the unwavering determination in his eyes. While the pain still lingered, Luna's fear began to lessen. In those moments, Paul's unconditional love became her greatest source of encouragement, her firm foundation to overcome everything. When Luna opened her eyes for the first time, she saw Paul sitting there, his eyes red from worry, but full of hope. Paul smiled, a warm and sincere smile, as if he had been waiting for this moment for a long time. His hands gently stroked her hair, not saying anything, just sitting there, feeling each weak breath she took. Luna felt at ease looking into his eyes. Despite the fatigue and pain, she could still feel the deep love Paul had for her. It was a love that no words could ever fully express. Luna was still weak, her little body not yet fully recovered from the complex surgery, but she knew that she had overcome a large part of this life and death trial, and throughout it all, she had never been alone. Paul had always been there, facing everything with her. Luna gently squeezed Paul's hand, a light gesture, but one full of meaning. It was like a silent thank you, a way for her to say that she understood, that she had felt the love he had for her. Paul looked into Luna's tired but determined eyes, and once again, he silently promised to himself that he would never leave her. No matter what the future held, no matter what challenges awaited them, he would always be by her side, protecting and loving her with all his heart. Those promises, those whispers, would be the bond that connected them forever, no matter how harsh life became. Luna slowly began to feel the strength in Paul's words of encouragement. She didn't need to know what the future would be like. She only knew that in this moment, Paul's love was everything. Every time he whispered words of love into her ear, she felt stronger, even though her body was still frail. The love Paul had for Luna was not just an emotion, but a strong commitment, an unbreakable promise. It was the only thing that helped her walk through the pain, through the worries and uncertainties. Luna no longer felt fear, because she knew that no matter how the world changed, there were people who loved her unconditionally, and that was the invaluable source of strength she had. In the days that followed, Luna gradually recovered. She was still weak, but no longer felt alone. Paul was always by her side, caring for her every day, helping her through the tough times. Every word of encouragement, every affectionate look was like a glimmer of light in the darkness, helping her see the way forward, seeing hope in the darkest moments. Luna knew she no longer had to face life alone. Although the road ahead was still full of challenges, with Paul's love and commitment, she knew she would overcome everything. The unconditional love he had for her was not only salvation, but also trust, an unwavering hope, helping her face the next challenges with courage. In the quiet space of the hospital room, Dr. Guadalupe sat facing Luna's test results, her eyes never leaving the medical indicators, the numbers glowing on the screen. Something was wrong. Every sign, every reading seemed to contradict Luna's age. The girl was only 9 years old, but her body showed strange developments that even an experienced doctor couldn't immediately explain. Dr. Guadalupe felt a growing sense of unease. Something behind these symptoms was hinting at a story that no one in the operating room had ever considered. She took a deep breath, feeling the room becoming more suffocating than ever. The doctors and nurses in the team were working tirelessly, but their eyes seemed to reflect what Dr. Guadalupe was feeling, something beyond their understanding. After consulting medical documents, Dr. Guadalupe quickly realized that Luna was suffering from a very rare condition called pituitary dwarfism. This rare disorder caused the girl's body to develop slowly in terms of appearance, but her internal organs developed like those of an adult. This explained how Luna could be pregnant, despite her external body showing no signs of maturity. Dr. Guadalupe felt as if she had just uncovered a crucial piece of the puzzle in Luna's condition. She immediately called the leading experts in rare diseases to discuss treatment methods and the necessary steps to save Luna's life and the child in her womb. The doctors and specialists provided advice and treatment strategies that could help, but they all understood that this condition required extremely careful and precise treatment. Even though the cause had been discovered, the treatment was still incredibly complex and could not guarantee success. While the calls continued, Dr. Guadalupe couldn't stop thinking about the unanswered questions. How did Luna end up in this condition? Why did such a young child have to bear such a disease? The unfairness in the girl's life made Dr. Guadalupe's heart ache. She thought about Luna, about everything the girl had endured so far. Though she was only 9 years old, she had faced challenges no child should ever have to endure. And now, Luna not only had to face this rare disease, but also a life-or-death surgery. Dr. Guadalupe and the medical team continued with the surgery, not pausing despite the many unanswered questions. They couldn't allow anything to slow down the healing process. They all understood that with every passing minute, Luna's life and the child in her womb became more fragile. Despite the revelation of the truth, Dr. Guadalupe knew she and her colleagues could not hesitate. The calls with experts kept coming, but they could not afford to wait any longer. Temporary solutions and methods for saving Luna were all they could manage at the moment. The doctors began to coordinate more effectively, quickly deciding to continue the surgery and stabilize Luna and the child, even though no one could predict the difficulties they would face during the procedure. Every decision had to be made cautiously, as Luna's life was crucial, but the child in her womb also needed to be saved. The doctors were faced with an incredibly difficult situation, one that no textbook could prepare them for. The questions about the cause of Luna's condition continued to swirl in the doctors' minds, but they refused to let themselves be distracted. Part of them knew they still faced many challenges ahead. Luna's condition remained very dangerous, and any mistake could ruin all their efforts. The doctors and nurses focused on their work, their surgical hands never stopping, with every movement carefully calculated. As the surgery continued, Dr. Guadalupe could not stop thinking about what was happening. She felt as though she were in the middle of a battle, where every decision could mean the difference between life and death. But despite everything, Dr. Guadalupe knew they couldn't give up. They couldn't let the unanswered questions affect their only mission: saving Luna and the unborn child. They couldn't stop, even knowing that the process would be extremely difficult and full of unforeseen challenges. The questions remained, but at this moment, there was only one thing that mattered. The lives of Luna and the child must be protected. As Luna and Paul stepped out of the hospital gate, the sunlight shone down, but the peaceful morning was shattered by the curious glances and the whispers full of doubt from the crowd around them. Despite having gone through a difficult surgery and surviving, they could not escape the judgmental stares of society. The people around them didn't know the truth about Luna and her rare condition. They didn't understand, but they continued to criticize and judge. Those glances caused Paul great pain. Every step they took was a challenge, not only physically, but also mentally. The whispers, the disdainful looks made the atmosphere heavier than ever. "That's surely a heartbreaking story," a woman muttered upon seeing Luna. "She's just too young to have to endure something like this. What's the baby in her womb, and who is responsible?" Words like these cut deep into Paul's heart. Although he had prepared himself for society's judgment, these words still made his heart ache. He pulled Luna close to him, as if to protect her from all the glances, all the words. But he knew he couldn't protect Luna from this stigma forever. The world out there would not always understand or show sympathy. Luna, though still young, seemed to sense the difference in the way people were looking at her. Her large eyes were still innocent and fearful, but she didn't cry, didn't show weakness. She felt the warmth of Paul's hand tightly holding hers, and that was the only strength that helped her keep moving forward. In this world full of judgmental glances and whispers, Luna and Paul both understood that they could only rely on each other. Every step they took was proof of their resilient love, a declaration that love could overcome all. The endless whispers continued, but instead of being crushed by the judgments, Luna and Paul kept walking, even though the path ahead was not easy. Unanswered questions still lingered, and curious eyes still followed them, but Paul and Luna did not stop. He refused to let himself become weak in the face of society's judgment. He silently reminded himself that no matter what the world thought of them, they would still be a family, and they would overcome every challenge together. As they stepped out of the hospital, despite the persistent stigmatizing glances, every step Paul and Luna took was a testament to the strength of love. No prejudice could make them falter. No judgment could dull the love between them. Luna still looked around with her clear gaze, but she no longer felt so afraid. She could feel that by her side was a father who would always protect and love her unconditionally, and that made her feel stronger than ever before. Their steady steps weren't without difficulty. No matter how society looked at them, no matter what people whispered about them, Paul and Luna continued forward with faith in themselves. Their love had already overcome every challenge, from illness to the skeptical gazes of society. They understood that love wasn't always easily accepted, but if that love was real and resilient, nothing could stop it. "We'll get through it all," Paul whispered to Luna, his eyes full of determination. Luna, though tired, gradually felt that belief growing within her. She didn't need to say anything, just tightened her grip on Paul's hand, as a silent thank you, as a promise that they would always be together, never giving up. The challenges from society may continue, but the love between them would be the strength to overcome it. Neither of them allowed society's stigma to disrupt the peace in their hearts. They walked on, not needing to worry about the glances or the words of others. Every step they took showed that love could overcome any barrier, that no matter how society viewed them, they would always be together, proving that love truly could conquer all. The lives of Luna, Paul, and the newborn child were not as easy as they had once hoped. But when they looked at each other, the resilience in their eyes became the greatest motivation for them to keep moving forward, even though the path ahead remained full of challenges. After all the turmoil, after countless unforeseen trials, they had found a solid foundation in their love and sacrifice for each other. Paul remained the steadfast father who stood firm against all storms, always protecting Luna, even though the world outside continued to judge them. Nevertheless, his determination never wavered. Every time he looked at Luna, seeing the strength in her eyes, he felt that all his efforts were worthwhile. The sweat, the sleepless nights of worry, everything seemed meaningful when he saw his son healthy, when he saw Luna smile, even if only for a brief moment. Luna, though still young, had matured a great deal through the challenges she had faced. Every day, she felt the unconditional love from Paul, the father she never imagined could love her so deeply. The pain and fears she once had seemed to fade away, replaced by a sense of peace, a strong comfort, when she realized she no longer had to face life alone. She had Paul. She had the child growing within their embrace, and that was enough to give her the strength to continue living. Day by day, they began to rebuild their lives. Although it was not easy, every step they took was a mark of love and perseverance. They learned to face the difficulties that society still imposed on them. The disapproving looks still existed, but now, those looks no longer made them falter. They no longer had to run from society's judgment. Instead, they lived truthfully with themselves, with what they had and were building together. As the days passed, the three of them began to realize that life wasn't just about the challenges they had to overcome, but also about the love they shared, the sacrifices they made for each other. The newborn child, though still unable to fully understand what had happened, was the result of a resilient love, a love that never gave up. That love not only helped Luna and Paul overcome trials, but also allowed them to see the light at the end of the tunnel. As time went on, the wounds began to heal. Their lives, though difficult, were filled with precious moments. Paul began to notice the changes in Luna, seeing her mature more each day, though the fears were still there. But he knew, with love and perseverance, Luna would overcome everything. Every time he saw Luna caring for the child, each gentle, affectionate gesture, he felt an overwhelming sense of hope. Luna had learned to love not just herself, but also the small family she had. With every step in their new life, Luna and Paul both understood that love was their greatest strength. Though the road ahead held many challenges, they had each other, and that was all they needed to move forward. Their new life was no longer filled with worry, but with days full of hope, love, and resilience. Their story ended not with a perfect conclusion, but with a powerful message about love, sacrifice, and the strength of perseverance in overcoming hardships. Luna, Paul, and the newborn child proved that no matter how many difficulties life brings, true love can conquer all. That love not only helped them survive, but also helped them live more fully, more completely, and stronger than ever before.